about Friday, kind of how the river between somebody going out and Dennis, for you, I'll make it an orange bucket.
Yeah. It's like a Home Depot bucket.
That's right. So the difference between going and getting lots of buckets back and forth. I know, it's just crazy. Into putting hoses into the river, right? We talked about that. You guys remember that? So the difference between the amount in Castrol's perspective, or and the difference between the time frames. So what I wanted to kind of show, extrapolate that. So where do rivers typically go? Eventually to the ocean, right? So say we had an ocean. And you're going to get a little oceanography lesson up in here. So how waves work in oceans is out when water is deep. They have a consistent wavelength. But then at a certain point, when they get to so you've got a wavelength. You guys know what a wavelength is? It's when from one point to the next. So this is considered your wavelength when you get to the same point of the next wave. So when waves get to 1.3 times their height, you start getting into, so here you have consistent wavelength. When you get a little into here and you start to get this area, that's when the wavelengths start getting shorter and a little bit higher, because the energy that's dissipated down starts bouncing back up sooner. So then you start kind of seeing the waves start kind of go a little bit higher and a little bit sharper until it gets to the point where it starts and then it dissipates out. So what you have here is when this height gets to a certain point, then the wavelength goes down, and the height goes up. Ember, enough. So there's another point where, Ember, I'm going to strangle you. So here is where you have the surf zone, kind of when the waves break. There's also there's a certain measurement of that. I don't remember what it was. It's like 0.5 times the height or something. So what ends up happening is when you have lots of water, you have a nice, easy, consistent flow. But then once we start getting into shallow water, it gets a little more exciting. So if you're a little surfer dude, this is a pretty exciting time, right? So it's fun. But what happens when this wave crashes?
Catch another one.
You go down, right? As opposed to if you've got a nice big sailboat with lots of people on it, you just ride the waves and keep going. So where's an analogy that you can talk about what are the differences between nice and consistent versus
recurring revenue.
Ongoing? So recurring revenue, right? So what ends up happening when we have recurring revenue is we start having more consistent, and we also end up being able to monitor cash flow better, so we can kind of budget better and go through here. So last fall, where were we at?
On the beach.
We were up here, right? Very exciting times. We were going out and closing all kinds of stuff. And what ends up happening is the wavelength gets short. So think about this as closed jobs. So all of a sudden we're closing a lot more jobs more often, which is more exciting, right? But it's also really exhausting because you're just getting pummeled by wave after wave after wave. So instead of being able to just ride the waves, you're just getting pummeled. And so that's where there's less margin for error here. There's more excitement going on if you can ride the wave. If you can actually stay on top of it and not fall, it's all good. But what happens, has anybody ever been surfing, or have you ever been in an ocean with big waves? If you get caught here, you can't hardly get up because it's one wave just smashing you after another. By the time you kind of figure out what's going on, you're getting smoked again. So what we've got to get to, and what we've been doing, is really focusing on taking our surfer dude and going out further and further and further and building a bigger boat and getting more people on board. So the more things we can handle as a team, the more resilient we become because we have a bigger boat that can handle things. What also happens though is if this boat starts drifting back in, we have less nimbleness because this is where a lot of big companies get in trouble because they have this big ocean liner and they can't get even this far in because they start hitting the ground. So the bigger we get, the more cognizant we have to be about how far in shore we're getting because we can't be as nimble. We still want to make sure that we're building our ship to be as nimble as possible. But what ends up happening is if we can stay focused on being in kind of this area here and continue to grow and continue to stay as efficient and effective as we can, that's where we're going to have consistent, just kind of repetitive success because we can just continue to just ride the waves. This is exhausting, and sometimes you drown, and drowning's not fun. How else do you guys see this play out in the company? Not rhetorical.
Well, I guess with the way that we do like small batch websites, so that development isn't getting owned by, you have to build 5 websites this week. It's homepage for a couple websites, and then in a couple weeks it's a subpage, so more smooth.
What we want to get to is a consistent flow of steady, nice big waves. So we're not in calm waters. I mean, there's waves that we're riding, but it's consistent and it's repetitive as opposed to crashing waves that were one wave across. So that's a good point. What else?
Similarly, when you instead of just selling like a logo or just selling a website, if you sell core messaging, logo, website, and everything for one client, it's like you do a little bit and then you do a little bit more, and it's more ongoing.
Mm-hmm. Right. So the overall, just the recurring revenue of things, it used to be we'd get one big check at the beginning and one big check at the end, where now we get a little check every month.
And the $20,000 goal, I guess, every week, so that it's not like we get $100,000 one week and next week we get negative $6,000.
So what ends up happening is there's as it goes from consistent to bigger and then it breaks. What ends up happening is the wavelength from the standpoint of from trough to trough is the same here, but also what ends up happening is the troughs are actually not as low and the peaks aren't as high, so the frequency gets shortened a little bit, as opposed to here you've got really high highs and really low lows. So what ends up happening is this is exciting, scary, exciting, scary. Then this wave doesn't come, or it's not as high as you think it was going to be, and then if this is where we have to be from a cash flow perspective, if all of a sudden this wave doesn't go as high or it doesn't come at all, then not only is this not where it needs to be, but then we've got a trough that follows, so we've got a double whammy. Good point.
When we're out there in the mid-range, we can choose to go paragliding or tubing or something, so we can have the excitement without all the danger.
That's right.
No, so we can
It's
take
true.
big jobs. It was a real thing. I wasn't just saying words. Like we can take exciting big chances without the risk of losing the company for
Yeah.
it.
We can go up higher into the air because we've got more water to land into. We can even go.
Not take on every wave that we need to.
Yeah. We can circumnavigate certain ones that we're like, that shit, we don't want them. Well, back to this is what we have to not become is this big ocean liner that can't move at all. So that's why we have to stay focused on efficiency and effectiveness, because that's how we avoid this while still getting this.